Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name's Justin, and today we're going to talk about the Nikon Z8, and I'm here to tell you that you should not buy it. The Nikon Z8, the golden boy of the Nikon mirrorless ecosystem, right next to the Z9, and I'm going to tell you that's not worth it. It's really not worth it to buy this camera right now. This review is going to be more of an introspective look at it. It's going to be my own experiences. You can always look up a spec sheet for this camera, but the things that really matter is how this camera feels and operates and what it brings to the table as you as a videographer or photographer, and whether this camera for $4,000 really does make your workflow easier or can let you do things that you couldn't do before. This review is for people that work in the same subject matter as myself. So I do portraits, large events, weddings, quinceañeras, all that stuff, but mainly photo and video for weddings and events and portraits. I've used the Nikon Z system since it came out, back when there was only 3 lenses, like the 35, the 50, and the 85. I go way back. I've been using it since day one on the Nikon Z6 I. I've had a Nikon Z6 II, and here on the channel, I've made it very clear that I love the Nikon ecosystem, but at the same time, the camera bodies are lacking. And people might say, well, why don't you just upgrade to the Nikon Z8 or the Z9, since it has the new processor in it and all this other stuff that's supposed to make it so much better. During my time using the camera, I have to say that it is not that breathtaking. I really thought it was gonna be more of a wow. Like, I expected more for the price point that it finds itself at. It is a generous discount from the $5,500 at the Nikon Z9, and to get the technology for $4,000 is definitely a bonus. And I gotta say that compared to something like a Z6 II, the Nikon Z8 feels only 25% better in the autofocusing department. It just really does. It's not that sticky. It still has the same jittery autofocus that the Nikon Z6 II had. And sometimes I even think it's too smart for its own good. For example, I was shooting a wedding and I know that there's options that help the camera succeed. For example, you can shrink down the box and customize your own. And I made this box that would go over the groom and just focus on that section. But as the groom walked around, there were other people behind the groom watching him give his speech. And the camera was too smart in a dumb way. I was impressed, don't get me wrong, because the groom was in focus. He walks a little bit to the right, and behind him is a table of people. And the camera switched over to the table. And I had no idea why I was doing that. I tried to pull focus back or move the eyeball selection back over to the groom. And it just kind of kept fighting between those two, so much so that I had my front function button to switch through my focusing modes on the Z8. And I switched to single point, and I had it on top of the groom and focus on him that way. I tried 3D, I tried the custom box, and 3D lost him, and the custom box was doing that weird thing. And so at the end, I just used single point focus, which for a $4,000 camera, I would hope that the autofocus would be better. So some background on me, I've used other brands. For example, I used to be a Sony photographer. I used to use the A9 Mark II, the A7R4, and I've also tried the Canon R6, the R6 Mark II, and I can tell you that the autofocusing on those cameras just works. Even on the R6, which is half or so of the cost of a Z8, it's better than it. It tracks better, it's more sticky. And even when I was using Sony back in 2020, that autofocusing is still leagues ahead of whatever the Z8 is doing. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a good camera for sure. I just don't think it lives up to the hype. I think that's the problem with it, because I was thinking about it, and the Nikon Z8 is basically the Z6 Mark I all over again. This is Nikon's very first pro body. Sony has been at it for a while, and Canon has just caught up to Sony, I would say, at this point. And while Nikon does bring a lot of cool features and doesn't handicap their camera bodies by hindering its performance or hiding features behind another camera spec, I just don't feel like the autofocus is quite there. And I feel like that's the 0 to 60 of the camera world. It sometimes doesn't matter at all depending on what you're doing, but if you do depend on it or like to have that feature, and I just find that it doesn't work. It's not at the point where I can confidently say that this is a game-changing camera to where Nikon truly catches up to the competition. I still think Nikon is behind in terms of camera bodies, but let me tell you, that's not a bad thing because camera bodies come and go. And so the Nikon Z8 feels like the C6 Mark I all over again. Remember when everyone just dogged on the C6 Mark I because it was bad, it didn't focus right, and all the features on it were just kind of wonky? I've had that camera since it came out and I'm on the latest firmware, so I've been through that journey. I stuck around because the lenses were so good. That's why Nikon is so amazing, because their lenses, the price to performance for some of their f4 lenses or their 1.8 primes are insane. So the lenses are definitely something that makes Nikon stand out in the crowd. Compared to Canon, Canon gives you can either get their 50 1.8, which is like $100 something, or their 50 1.2, which is like $2,000. And Nikon released with the very first mirrorless camera, their 50 1.8, 85 1.8, and 35 1.8, which are all stellar lenses and have received such popular reviews. The only thing holding these lenses back just a little bit are the camera bodies, but that's okay because camera bodies come and go. If you can even look up on eBay, the most popular flagship body of yesterday, like a 1DX or something like that, they go for significantly less than how much you would have paid for them when they were brand new. Camera bodies don't age well, lenses do. And I believe that Nikon has the best value for lenses. Not only that, while Canon is innovating, creating new, unique, exotic lenses, I definitely think that Nikon's working on a different field. Okay, Canon is working on 24 to 105 f2.8s, 28 to 70 f2s. Well, they're really popular in the wildlife scene. Their telephoto lenses are absolutely amazing, and they're offering some lenses that Canon isn't. So maybe that's the different angle that they chose to take. I'm sure eventually they might catch up and create their own formula of these lenses, so it's only a thing of a matter of time. But the way it stands right now, I believe that you should not buy the Nikon Z8. It just doesn't make sense at $4,000. I think when you can get it used from $2,800, $2,500, it's a great buy. But right now, at its brand new price of $4,000, it just doesn't make sense for you to buy it. Even with a rebate, let's say it's $3,500, I would still say it's a little bit much. You would be better off buying a new or slightly used C6 Mark II that will get you about 90% of the way there if you're doing photos and about 85% of the way there if you're doing video. Yes, I have just said in this video alone, complaining that it's kind of janky, but it's good enough, and you can help these cameras with individual settings to help them succeed and do their best. So with that, the Nikon Z8 is just the second coming of Nikon Z6. It's Nikon's first ever blank camera, professional camera. And so maybe they are working on something fantastic that will just catch up to the competition. Right now, I don't think they did that, and that's okay. With firmware, I'm sure it could get better, but the limitation is the hardware. And also, you should never buy a camera based off just promises of firmware, because it might not ever, come to fruition. It might not happen. But where I'm most positive is in the lens selection. I definitely think that Nikon's offering some great values when it comes to hybrid lenses. They do video really well, they're silent, they focus really smooth, and they are working harder and harder to make these lenses work the way that people that work heavily in video would like them to. When it comes to photography, the lenses have been absolutely amazing. Even the C6 Mark I in 2024 for me still holds up. When I go on a shoot, I don't really mind it too much. I am aware of its flaws and I know how to overcome it and work with the camera. It makes it a little bit cumbersome and sometimes the camera just acts quirky, but overall I can't really complain. It does its job well as much as I need it to. And that's the problem. The fact that the C6 II felt comparable to what the Z8 is doing just kind of showed me that it's not that big of a gap. I would say the biggest feature improvements would be the internal RAW recording and the internal N-Log. But then again, the current ZF does that. So it's only a matter of time till the C6 Mark III comes out and also has internal N-Log, which in that case, it won't separate it that much from the Z8. Even though I do work in video, I didn't use the RAW recording while I had it. I messed around with it, recorded a couple clips, but I think for a full event, it's not really that practical. You can set it to raw recording normal quality, and at a 4K 24, you can get up to like 40 minutes, I think, if I remember correctly, versus people exaggerating and having it at 8K raw with high quality raw. It would only go for like 3 minutes on 128 gigabytes versus the 40 minutes that I was seeing with 128 gigabytes. Could you shoot an event like this? Yes. But as of currently, my program, Premiere Pro, doesn't support Nikon RAW, which is okay, that's on me, right? You can always go and learn DaVinci or something else, or Final Cut, whatever supports the Nikon RAW. But right now, Premiere Pro does not support it. So that's why I used it, but I didn't find it too useful. Right now, I find that N-Log does more than enough than I needed to, and it's super well to work with. I'm sure that having the extra information will be super helpful that people that usually work with like Blackmagic or Red cameras, and it could integrate into their workflow. But for me, someone that makes their living from their camera gear, I would have to say that the way I can kind of compare having internal raw video inside of the Z8 is kind of like frames per second when it comes to still photography. You can do 30 frames per second raw, but why would you? You would kind of be inconveniencing yourself by doing that. It changes the workflow, but also, as much as this is nice to have, it's just not practical. For example, I find that the shooting speed of the C6 II with flash is about like 6 frames per second, and that's fine because most of the time I'm not spamming the shutter. I'm shooting intentionally because I don't want to be interrupting the venue with my flash. So shooting less makes me focus more on the shot and be more attentive with what I'm trying to capture, rather than just firing off 30 shots, and Lord knows what that's gonna do to my memory storage, my strobe lights at the day of an event, and how much extra time I'm gonna have to do culling through all those photos. So I would say it's a nice to have. It's definitely not something that you can't make money on. When I deliver a project to a client, I don't think they're worried whether it was recorded in 8-bit, 10-bit, or N-Log or whatever, because they're watching it on their phone, and if they do watch it on their TV, it still looks great. You don't need 8K RAW. If you want more control, yes, again, it's a nice to have, and definitely the people that need it will use it. But I say for like 90% of us that work these type of events and stuff, don't need it. I think something that I always think about when I'm making these kind of videos is that most people that are successful with their business are business-minded people first, rather than tech people. Some of the people that I've worked with, and I'm not saying this in a bad light, definitely being on YouTube and making videos like this and just talking about a camera definitely pulls me a little bit apart from everyone else, because most people just want their camera to work, take pictures, edit in Lightroom, and just have an easy time moving a slide around to edit and get the look that they want, and then focusing on the business side. And those are the people that are successful. I know so many people like that, and there's nothing wrong with them not being so tech savvy and knowing all the ins and outs of their camera. I'm the type that reads the manual whenever I get a new anything. I read the manual. Who does that nowadays? Me, I do. So for most people that just need their camera to work and might look up how to set the codec that they want to film or shoot on for the first time and just leave it there forever, I don't think many people are going to be affected by being able to have internal RAW recording. I think the Nikon Z6 II already does a good enough job with its internal recording capabilities, and as much as I would like to get rid of the Atomos so I don't have to carry extra batteries and stuff like that, it's still nice to have. But definitely I'm ready for the Z6 III to come out and have internal N-Log. That is literally the only thing that would be better for me. Yes, the autofocus would be exponentially better going from a C6 Mark I to a C6 Mark III. But from a 2 to a 3, it's like 25% better. If the ZF has the same processor as the 9 and the 8, then I expect it to be 30 to 25% better. That is helpful, but it's not worth $4,000. So as much as the Nikon Z8 is currently the precious child of the Z8 community, I can confidently say that it's not worth upgrading. If you're thinking about upgrading, maybe you already have 2 camera bodies, 3 camera bodies on the Nikon Z mount, maybe a Z5, a Z6, a Z7, and you're thinking about upgrading, I would put that money towards lenses. Because with lenses, you can do so much different types of work rather than a camera body. You can always do things to make the camera body work better. Obviously, it has its limitations. I don't think that the C6 II or the ZF or the C6 Mark I are that hindering. Maybe the C6 Mark I with only its one SD card, but the ZF and the C6 II both have dual card slots. So all you pros that can't live without your cards, there you go. When it comes to video, most cameras, even the Z8 currently can only record to one slot, so that's not really a problem. And then from there, I would say that camera bodies are just not that good of an investment. So what I'm trying to say is that instead of buying the Nikon Z8 for $4,000 or $3,500 when it's on discount, you should take that money and think about upgrading your lens kits. Not only will different lenses let you do different effects and get different looks, they can land you certain types of jobs. If you get a 14 to 24 millimeter, you can all of a sudden do real estate if you want. You have the lens to do it, why not try and do it a couple times? If you get a 7200, now you can be a second shooter at a wedding, and you can snipe out pictures that the main photographer would like, but is too busy shooting on their 15 millimeter or the 24 to 70. There's definitely more value in getting lenses. And while the headline features are definitely eye-catching, and every brand needs their flagship feature so that way they can put that everywhere and say that they're better than the competition, I definitely think the Nikon Z8 has features that most photographers won't even use. The pre-capture is only available in JPEG, and I think like sports photographers and wildlife photographers will definitely be using that. But if you're in portraits, you're shooting RAW and the pre-capture is not available in RAW yet. As far as I know, they might do a firmware update, but it's not available in shooting RAW. And then from there, the internal RAW recording, as much as it is nice to have, it's not really practical. Like I said, if you're recording a high quality clip, that's like max 3 minutes on 128 gigabytes. When it comes to taking pictures on the Z8, I found that the higher megapixel count compared to the C6 II wasn't that much of a problem because the camera only lets you shoot forms of compressed RAW. There's nothing wrong with that. Most of them are visually lossless and just losses in general. So what that means is that even though they're compressed, they're not much different at all compared to uncompressed RAW photos. So in the end, the Z8 takes about the same size pictures in terms of storage compared to a C6 II, which has like a 24 megapixel sensor. When it comes to recording video on the Z8, I noticed that the internal N-Log definitely chews through cards a lot faster than I've ever been used to. I found myself constantly swapping CF Express cards in and out of my camera. I'm not used to that because usually I would shoot internally with a Nikon Z6 II 4K 24 at 8-bit. Nothing wrong with that. As long as I got the shot, the lighting is good, white balance is set, it was more than enough. And I never really complained about that. And I've just recently started introducing analog into my workflow because I have the Atomos and the ZF has it internally and the Z8 had it internally. So that's definitely something that I am comfortable now going into and getting one of these new cameras and using. When it comes to battery life, the Z8 devours batteries. This thing was going through batteries faster than I could swap them out and charge them. When I'm on an event, I bring my chargers and I have them plugged into a wall. That way when one battery gets low, I can take it out, put a new one in, and have that one charging throughout the day. I usually find a little corner with some outlets and I just have my charging station there. I was going through batteries so fast on the Z8 using internal 4K N-Log that I was worried that I was not going to be able to recharge the batteries fast enough. I have 7 batteries. I've never ran into this issue before with the Z6 IIs. So that is something that you need to keep in mind, is that this camera just loves to eat power. While recording the 4K N-Log, the camera body did get hot and I did get a hot card warning on the screen, but it never stopped shooting and it never gave me any problem. So I think it's just letting me know the card is hot and to be careful when touching it. I didn't ever think that it got hot enough to where it hurt or anything when taking out the card, but it definitely makes you think about the temperature of your camera, which is something that I've never had to think about before with the Z6. I've never seen the Z6 do any sort of heat warning or anything like that, even when recording in its highest codecs. So with the Z8, it heats up, gets warm. I can definitely feel it on the hand grip, and I can definitely feel it from below whenever I'm taking pictures, and I can definitely feel it when I take out a card and try to swap to a different one, that card is gonna be hot. Now with the high burst rates while shooting raw photos, can sometimes be cumbersome. It could also be useful. I'm not dismissing the feature. For example, let's say recently graduation pictures are popular in my town. Let's say like they're popping a champagne bottle and celebrating. 30 frames per second or so would be super useful to have that with raw photos. But I think most of the time during events and stuff like that, I definitely had to dial down the speed that the camera was shooting at. Like even on its lowest setting, I had to switch it down to like 5 or 6 frames per second compared to the highest that it could do, which was just overkill, and I didn't need it to be doing all that. Even if I tried to be as careful as I could with the shutter to just take one picture, just one click of the shutter when it's on its highest setting would take like 5 pictures, and it just looked ridiculous, and I never did it. I did it once when I forgot to switch my settings with it once I put my flash on, and after that I switched it to like low shooting speed, 5 or 6 frames per second, and then it was able to only take one picture at a time. If you're thinking about picking up the Z8 for photography, it's not worth it. Get a C6 Mark II. If you already have a C6 Mark II, get an extra C6 Mark II for a backup camera, and you would still have a lot of money left over to add a new lens to your collection, or maybe some extra batteries or CF Express cards. If you're thinking about getting the Z8 for video, the RAW recording feature could be useful. I definitely say it's not something I would die without. You can get the internal N-Log, but so does the ZF, which is cheaper than the Z8. I don't see the reason to buy a Z8 unless you really need the niche feature that it's offering: pre-capture, the RAW recording, and the subject detection shooting, where you set it up, if anything comes in the box, it takes pictures. That's pretty useful if you use wildlife. But aside from those, if you're just looking for a new camera body, or you're upgrading, or you want a second camera body, I would say get a Z6 Mark II. It's not that far off from the performance that I felt using the Z8. And I don't want to come off like I'm just taking a dump on this camera. It definitely has its place, but right now in history, it's an important camera because it's Nikon's first professional mirrorless camera. But as time goes on, it'll be quickly forgotten by technology that will come out, and then eventually no one will want to buy it because there's a new camera on the block that is that much better than the Z8. It'll be a great pickup when it's used. I might get one when it's used, but right now for the new pricing, I can't see myself getting it anytime soon. I'll hold out for the Nikon Z6 Mark III, and even when the Z6 Mark III comes out, I will wait for that camera to go down in price, and then I might wait to see if anyone returns it and I can buy one used, because camera bodies are a really bad investment. They just are. Right now, the C6 Mark II that I am filming this on, if I got this camera when it was new, it was like $2,000. Right now you can pick up a gently used one with like 2,000 shutter clicks on it for about $1,200. That's literally like $800 just gone. It still has the same great capacities, just that there's new technologies and the camera has aged, and that just makes the value of it go down. Versus lenses, they're not exactly 100% hold their value, but they still are better investments in terms of returns. You can do so much more with a lens than you can with a camera body, and I would definitely suggest that you do that. And before y'all say I'm a Nikon hater, I can't even begin to tell you, dude, I spent so much money on these lenses, dude. These are 2.8s, 1.8s, and anything in between. I've invested so much money into this system because the lenses are absolutely amazing. 7200 f2.8, absolutely fantastic lens. Love the way this thing handles. This thing feels solid as a rock. I've taken such great photos with it. I love using this lens. 135 1.8 plana, amazing. I love the rendering on it. The bokeh is incredible. This thing's a monster. 24-70 2.8 S. Absolutely fantastic zoom lens. Just as sharp as the primes on the old DSLR days. This is such an amazing lens. 14-30 f4. Even at f4, it's still an S-grade lens. It works fantastic. And I can't say enough good things about this lens. The 24, the 35, the 50mm that I'm filming this on right now, absolutely gorgeous primes that just create the most wonderful images. And they work so fast, and they never fail me in terms of like quality, sharpness, rendering, anything you would want in lenses, all these lenses have, and they work so well, and they're so good. And I genuinely think that Nikon is doing really, really amazing in its lens department, and I want Nikon to win so bad. Not because I have a favorite, but because I have so much money invested into them. And as much as that's part of the equation, I still think Nikon is my favorite brand. I love the way the ergonomics work on it. It feels so comfortable in the hand. The menu system I like because I'm used to it maybe, but I just like the menu system. It's not as convoluted as Sony's. Everything makes sense. The way the interface looks, the viewfinder experience, it's all so great. And I love every single bit of the Nikon cameras, and I love the Nikon lenses even more. And I've put so much of my hard-earned money into this system. Trust me on this. I'm not just a Nikon hater. I have shot with Nikon as far back as the D750 when I was starting out as my first professional camera, and then the C6 Mark I. I really do like working with these camera bodies, but if a better tool came out that was leagues ahead of it came out, I would switch to that just because it makes more sense. Cameras are tools. I'm not loyal to Nikon. They don't pay me to promote their videos. Matter of fact, most of my videos are me saying that I wish they could be better, which I do. Mainly their camera bodies. Their lenses are fantastic. That's all I had to say. I hope this was useful to you. Just the way the camera felt to me was not worth it. I definitely save your money. Don't take all these super hyped up reviews with dreams of this camera fixing every problem you've ever had, because the truth is it just doesn't. It's not that crazy ahead of the C6 Mark II. The ZF matches it. If you need a new camera body for $2,000, the ZF is great. But right now, don't let all the marketing hype and YouTube videos fool you. It's just not worth it. I just wouldn't get it. I keep saying this, but I just wouldn't get it. And I don't think you should either. I think that if you have a really niche use for it and it fits exactly what you've been missing, go for it. But I think if you're a current C6 Mark II user, there's no reason to upgrade. There really isn't. You are 90% of the way there with this camera, and I would save that money and put it towards something else rather than buying a new camera body. Could you buy the Z8 and use the C6 II as a second camera body? Sure, it would be slightly better, but I just don't think it's all that. I think that once the C6 Mark III comes out, it'll just fill in that gap that we need. We need that strong mid-level prosumer camera in the middle range. That's the one that's gonna make Nikon the most amount of publicity and the one that's gonna bring new people into the system. Brand new people that are starting out and getting serious in photography aren't looking to drop $4,000 on a camera body. They might be doing a little bit of an extra stretch purchase on a $2,000 camera body or a $2,500 camera body, and then if they like that system, they'll stay in it. So I think that middle range is super important for every camera brand. And right now, I think Sony's got it down. I think Canon's got it down with the R6 Mark II, but I just don't think that Nikon has it to that level when it comes to the ZF and the C6 Mark II. They are definitely good, especially the ZF. The ZF is really good, but it's not where they need to be to compare to the other two brands. I definitely would say that Nikon is in third right now. But that's not what this video is about. This is about celebrating Nikon's growth. And also, it's about me telling you to not spend your money on a purchase that won't make sense. I definitely have fallen victim to this and thought that a new piece of equipment would solve all my problems. And I'm glad to say that I tried it and I returned it, so that way you don't spend your money on something that's not gonna perform the way that you think it is. So where do we go from here? I would say we wait, we continue to wait. So I love Nikon, I love my camera, I love my lenses, but here's the thing, I have no brand loyalty. If I could justify it, I would switch systems, I would. But I have so much invested in this that I want to wait it out. It's not terrible, it's not bad that I can't make money from my system or my lenses or my camera bodies. I definitely can work professionally with what's out there right now. The ZF, the Z8, the C6 Mark II. But the fact is that Nikon is in third compared to the competition. There's nothing wrong with that. All these cameras companies are innovating at an amazing pace. We've received so much new lenses and things that we didn't think was possible. 24-105 f2.8 lens, 28-70 f2. Those are crazy lenses that I would have never even tried to come up with. So to end this video on a positive note, I definitely think that Nikon is doing amazing when it comes to their lenses. They have absolutely fantastic offerings. Price to performance is just crazy. The 50 1.8 is a legend in its own right, and other lenses such as the 135 and the 70-200 are super good lenses. The 24-70 2.8 is just as sharp as primes from the DSLR age. These lenses are amazing, and I absolutely love using them. I just need the camera bodies to catch up. That's it. It's not that much. It's probably just a noticeable gap. I'm definitely more inclined to notice it because I really love technology and I shoot at the very limit of these cameras. Like, I am pushing these cameras every time I go out and I shoot an event. Dim lighting, tracking moving people, all this stuff. I think any camera brand would struggle, but I have noticed other brands perform better. Even on simple day-to-day or just simple photo shoots, other brands have performed better. And yes, Z6 Mark II, you should be upgrading the Z8, you're outdated, you're not giving good valid points. Well, I've tried the Nikon Z8, and I'm here to tell you, it's not all that. It's not worth it. Definitely wait out for the Z6 Mark III if you want a couple new features, but right now, I would be completely happy buying another Z6 Mark II or a Z6 Mark III whenever that comes out, and then reinvesting that money into my business in other ways, such as lenses or tripods, something that actually makes sense. The Z8 does not make sense to buy. I hope this video was useful. I hope I gave as much useful feedback as possible. I don't know where Nikon goes from here, but it can only get better. Their lenses can only get better. There's 35 1.2 out on the horizon, which I'm super excited about. The Z6 Mark III, I'm excited about. They have so many Nikon mirrorless Z-mount lenses, and they're so good. And there's camera bodies will catch up. It's only a matter of time, and I believe that they will. But right now, I don't believe in lying to you and saying that the Z8 was this absolutely amazing camera that did everything. It did my taxes, it solved all my problems, my marriage, everything. It's just not. And all the good positive reviews can just be for pandering, or maybe continuing to get sent out products by a company. I'm not sponsored. No one paid me to make this video. I don't get paid to do YouTube. I do this for fun. And I also do this because I hate spending money in the wrong places. I hate feeling like I paid for something and I didn't get my money's worth. And I feel like that's where the Nikon Z8 is. As incredible as it is, it's not worth $4,000. It's not changing the way my business operates. It's not changing the way I shoot. It's not making me more money. I could definitely put that money to use somewhere else, and I definitely will. Whenever that camera body comes down in price in the used market, I might get one. But as it stands right now, I would save my money, and I suggest you do the same. Please feel free to comment down below what you think. I'd love to chat with you in the comments. I hope this video was useful. If you watched all the way to the end, consider subscribing for more content like this. My name is Justin, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.